Good afternoon and welcome to the media panel. My name is Gilbert Martinez. I'm with the Rogers Hornsby chapter in Austin, Texas and Central Texas. And some of you may know I'm a former newspaper journalist. And so for me, coming to a SABR conference, one of the things I've always loved was the media panel. Because these are the folks, I have some kinship with them because I appreciate kind of what position they're in. As fans, sometimes they're the ones that we hear the good news about our team, and sometimes they break the bad news to us. Sometimes they make us laugh. Sometimes they make us cry. Sometimes they make us pull our hair out, and some of us have more hair than others, right? But these are folks, that really bring the game to us in their descriptions and their analysis, in their broadcasting. Some of them, the stories that they bring to us is instantaneous in their broadcast, some of them with analysis. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you. You recognize all of the faces up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our moderator today, Brett Dolan, and I'm going to allow him to tell a little more about the panelists, and they will give us a very interesting perspective on what they do day to day and what they've done in their careers. So our moderator is going to be Brett Dolan, who has nearly 20 years of professional baseball play-by-play experience, including 7 years on the Houston Astros radio broadcast team. He works with CBS Sports Radio 610 AM in Houston. And I want to tell you, this morning I saw that he tweeted, he has a nice column in a perspective that I can appreciate about the Houston Astros and their trade yesterday. And Brett Dolan offers this perspective that some Astro fans who are loyal and who love the team and want to see them do well think that, well, the trade's good because it's going to help us. But then there are others that wonder, is this pushing off our victory parade beyond 2017? Is it maybe 2020, 2025? I highly encourage you to look up Brett Dolan's column about that. I think it captures kind of how sensitive we are as Astro fans that I think many can appreciate. But join me in welcoming Brett Dolan.
Thank you, Gilbert. This is a wonderful turnout today. We all appreciate your wonderful attendance. I know there will be cards at the back of the room for some questions, and in the last 15 or 20 minutes or so, we'll have a chance to hear from you and ask some questions to the panelists that maybe I haven't had a chance to do so over the course of our program. I want to introduce everybody on the panel, and I'm going to start from my far right. Evan Drellich is somewhat new to town. He is the new Astros beat writer for the Houston Chronicle, and he's made an immediate impact in this city. I'm meeting him for the first time today, but I've been following his work, and Houston's a little different media market than some of the larger cities, but especially in the last few years, I feel like there hasn't been someone out there maybe willing to call into question what is taking place, ask a few more questions than the rest. No more. Evan has previously covered the Red Sox and worked for Newsday in New York, but we're happy to have him in town for the Houston Chronicle. Evan Drellich. To his left, Bill Brown. He's in his 28th year as a broadcaster with the Houston Astros. He's covered Major League Baseball games really over 3 decades now. And long overdue this past year, he was the Texas Sportscaster of the Year by the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. And also, SABR members will know he authored the book Deep in the Heart, chronicling the Astros' 50th anniversary. And without his tireless efforts, this important project would not have happened. No way, no how. One of the true gentlemen in our game, my friend Bill Brown. To his left is Alyson Footer. Alyson is a national correspondent with MLB.com. I just love that title. Her Twitter bio explains that she's a baseball nut who appreciates good friends, good beer, pitching, speed, and defense. And that sounds about spot on. She's previously worked with the Astros in different capacities and once served as an Astros beat writer for MLB.com. She's really everywhere during the baseball season. Today, though, she's here, and we're glad for it. Alyson Footer. And to my right, Buck Martinez. I'm also meeting Buck for the first time today, but I've listened to him for many years. Former big league player and manager. Buck is the TV voice of the Toronto Blue Jays. And I must admit, I even forgot that Buck managed Team USA in the inaugural World Baseball Classic. but he's a California native who lives in Florida, who works in Toronto, but today he's here. We've cornered him, and we're thrilled to have Buck Martinez in attendance.
Thank you.
I have a number of topics I'd like to touch on today, but I'm going to start with Alyson because it's ladies first, right?
Oh, my.
Even in this environment. You know, covering the game really has changed so much over the last 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. Social media, tweets, the race to be first has all kind of changed the dynamics. You know, there's some old-time PR guys that used to say they take a deep breath once the paper went to bed at night about 11 o'clock or 11:30. They had another 24 hours to kind of catch their breath in case something came out that they didn't want covered for the club. No more. It's really a 24/7 cycle, and I think we're the better for it, but it does pose some challenges. So, Alyson, we'd like to start with you and just ask you about covering this sport when there is no time frame. It's all day long. There's this insatiable appetite out there for covering baseball, and you're part of it as a national correspondent, but what are some of the challenges you face in this new environment compared to maybe where baseball was from a media standpoint 15, 20 years ago?
Well, first of all, I think that it's difficult to exercise restraint, and that's what the most important thing is when you are covering anything, but especially something that everyone is paying attention to. So it's very easy to have some information and want to tell the world that you have this information before anyone else. I mean, that is what drives us as reporters, is to break stories and get scoops, and but you have to make sure it's correct, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes things need to be researched more thoroughly. You need to make some more phone calls, and I don't know if anybody's really paying attention to what was going on during the trade deadline yesterday, but you know, Twitter is the main thing that everybody is using to find out any information about the rumors going on, and it was a bonanza yesterday as far as what I've never seen a trade deadline like this. Major league players were getting traded for major league players, which almost never happens. So, and a very prominent person in the media, that I'm not going to mention his name, but he saw a fake Twitter account that he didn't know was fake, and it tweeted out a deal that had been made, and he stole it and used it as if he was breaking it. And it turned out that it didn't happen because it was just completely created by some anonymous guy somewhere in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So he was humiliated, and that'll follow him around for a while. But the problem is that there really is no accountability anymore. I mean, you really have to stay true to yourself when you're covering something to make sure that it's right, because it can be completely humiliating if it's wrong. I remember when MLB.com started, and Jerry Hunsaker was the general manager of the Astros, and he wasn't really understanding what this whole thing was happening. He didn't understand this whole internet thing and what was coming. And I said, well, let's say that somebody falls out of a tree at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's one of your players. I can post a story about it at 3 o'clock in the morning, and everyone will know about it. And he was kind of floored by that. But there's no time frame anymore. There's no getting up and rushing to see what's in the paper, and your competitors are all nervous about that. It's really just, and it's all consuming, and it can really break you down because you don't feel like you could ever get off of your phone, checking Twitter, checking the news, MLB trade rumors, and it can really, mess with you, but you just have to be careful. And it's a wonderful tool, and it's great for the consumers, but it's rough for the people that are bringing you the news.
And Evan, I think you'd probably say the same thing. It used to be a beat writer would have his game story, maybe some notes or a column on the weekend. Now you're tweeting, you're blogging, you're taking video. You're kind of an all-encompassing media mogul yourself.
Yeah, Twitter's terrible in a lot of regards because I can't get off it. Everywhere I go, I'm at dinner with my girlfriend, I have to check Twitter. Yesterday morning I woke up to phone calls about trades happening and stories I needed to get on because they're on Twitter. So it's really changed, I think, any beat writer's job in that regard. A national job, a columnist's job, everything happens on Twitter. There isn't a single baseball story broken outside of Twitter. It just takes over your life. I mean, when I'm on vacation, I try to separate it, but for better or worse, that's just where we've arrived. I don't know, in 10 years, I don't know if Twitter is the place to be, but for right now and for the last, what would you say, 5 years? I mean, Twitter is where baseball news happens, universally. Nothing happens outside of Twitter.
Things have also changed from the broadcast standpoint, and I have two great ones here with me today, and Bill Brown and Buck Martinez. And Brownie, I'll start with you. When you started calling games for the Reds, not every game was on TV. It was special when a game was on TV. And I guess at age 44, I'm probably about the oldest person that can still remember the fond memories of the game of the week and how unique it was to see two teams that maybe it would be the only time you could watch them for several months. And now you can watch games, every game's on TV. It's available on satellite, the internet, available for cut-ins on MLB.com or MLB Network. And it really seems like this game has never been more popular. We know the TV ratings aren't exactly great, but is the coverage too much right now, or is this where 10, 15 years ago every fan wanted it to be, where you could see every game, every pitch, and have everything available right there in your laptop, your car, your phone, or your television?
Brett, I just looked in the paper today and I saw we had a TV rating of 0.0 for Wednesday's game. So maybe I'm not the guy to answer this question. But if anybody
so if a tree
was out
falls
there,
in a forest?
Yeah, the tree falls in the forest. But no, if anybody out here was watching, I know you weren't because you're at these sessions. Thank you, whoever you are, even though you're okay. Even though it didn't register, thanks for watching. So, no, it has changed a lot because with Cincinnati back in the 70s, we televised 3 home games a year. The Reds just didn't feel that it was good for attendance to televise home games. You know, they were a very conservative organization. Nobody wore anything other than black shoes. And boy, if those guys ever made an all-star team, they were breaking out the white shoes in that all-star game, I can tell you that. But no, it's you know, we're all checking Twitter now between innings and afraid we're going to miss something and somebody else is going to say, well, why didn't you have that? Are you ignoring this story? Or are you doing this because it's a bad reflection on the team? Or, you know, and so, yeah, it kind of puts the pressure on everybody, I think, keeps everybody honest. But by the same token, you know, coming from a quieter time when, yeah, we look forward to, you know, getting up, reading the paper. Okay, what have I missed overnight here? Yeah, things have certainly changed big time.
And Buck, as a manager and as a player, there were probably days when the game was covered differently than now, but you've had a unique perspective of both, from your playing background to managing to now being broadcasting. I'm curious about your opinions and thoughts of this too, because you know, these managers and players are under the microscope now. Not that they weren't back then, but any game can be dissected and replayed in videos and analyzed on MLB Network and Sports Center and Baseball Tonight. There's no stopping.
No, there certainly isn't. And I think it's changed so much in every aspect. In my first year in professional baseball was 1967. And we used to wait to get the sporting news every week, and the stats would be 2 weeks late. So the way it's changed is unbelievable. But as far as a manager's perspective, it's really interesting because now it has become standard for managers to have a media scrum. So you will have, in Boston, of course, there'll be 35 writers with John Farrell. In New York, there'll be 40 with Joe Girardi. And there's going to be a whole bunch of this. And the guys in the back row are going to hear bits and pieces. And Girardi might say something to the effect that Brian Roberts is the worst second baseman that I've ever seen, and finish out something positive. And the only piece that one guy heard is he's the worst second baseman, and that goes on Twitter like that. Joe Girardi thinks Brian Roberts sucks. And there you have it. But, you know, the manager has to be very careful. And I think the problem is everybody has a job. The beat writer has to report on the team. Columnist has to give his opinion on what's going on behind the scenes. They make judgments according to how the team is operating. I'm a play-by-play TV announcer now. I was formerly an analyst. My role has changed dramatically. Now I am the what guy, and the analyst is the why guy. So I tell you what just happened and what this guy has done this year and what he's hitting and where he comes from. And my partner, Pat Tabler, tells you why he got that base hit, how come he was thrown out at third base. And he's the why guy, but it has changed dramatically over the years. And you're right, I had a chance to work with the late Harry Coyle, and he was the director of the Game of the Week for 40 years. And when I first started broadcasting, I went to Harry Coyle and went to his house, and he critiqued my tapes. And he worked with everybody. Pee Wee Reese and Joe Garaziola and Tony Kubek and Vin Scully and all of them. He worked with everybody. And the one thing he said to me was, if you don't have anything to say, don't talk. Because it is television and there are pictures. And if you're talking all the time, people are going to shut you off. But if you're not saying much and all of a sudden they hear your voice, they're going to move up closer to the television and listen to what you say. It was great advice. Oftentimes I forget it, but it's great advice.
Really, that's a great segue into my next topic, and it kind of comes under the heading of criticisms, opinions, and insight. And I want to hear from all four members of our panel on this. But Buck, I'm going to start with you because I hear former players say, and I think it's valid, that they never want to forget how tough the game is down there from up here. And sometimes when we watch on television, it's easy to say, why did they make that play? How did they screw that up? As a former player, though, you have the gravitas to maybe critique or, if need be, point out mistakes. But how do you strike that balance between pointing out what transpired without feeling like maybe there's too much criticism and forgetting how tough it is to play down in the field?
I have a unique perspective because I was a broadcaster, I became a manager and went back to broadcasting. I went to the manager's role without any coaching experience, and it was actually the second time they had offered me the job. And the first time I turned the job down because my son was transferring to a different college and I agreed to go coach with him for 3 years. But when I went back down on the field for the first time after 14 years of being away from the field, every day I wanted to go, wait a minute, this is going too fast. We got to slow things down a little bit. But I had a pitching coach and I had a bench coach that I utilized every day. And the game comes so fast. And one thing that I have always told myself is, I call it the dirt theory. The farther away from the dirt you get, the easier the game becomes. When you're standing on the dirt, it's a hard game. The coaches go sit in the dugout. They're a little bit further away from the dirt. It becomes easier. The fans are behind the dugout. They're farther away from the dirt, and it's just a piece of cake. Well, the broadcasters, they're so far away, they think anybody could play. So I always remind myself of the dirt theory, that this game is very fast and very hard, and it's a very small group of people that can play it.
And I want to ask Alyson and Evan about the challenges of that as well. But Brownie, I'm going to segue to you because you've covered a team that's lost 112 games, 107, 106, not that I'm counting, but it's easy to remember. You're a team employee. You're out there in some senses to try and find the positive, however difficult that may be. But there are stretches, and last year's 15-game losing streak to end the season was one where there just aren't many.
And I think that's the time to exercise what Buck was talking about. It's a time to shut up sometimes. And, not to ignore what's happening. You can see on your TV set exactly what's happening. You can see it replayed 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. You can see all the stats up on the screen. You've been watching the players. So sometimes in the back of my head, it's like, well, what I'm thinking about saying, I've said probably 50 times this year, so I think I'll just say nothing now, just for a little variety. But, you get to the end of the season, your team's losing 15 in a row. It's a historic season. There's not a whole lot more you can add at that point. It really isn't.
Alyson and Evan, everybody wants to kind of differentiate themselves, and it's in every profession. It's not just as a reporter or a broadcaster, but there's so many people out there. There's so much noise and so much competition. What has been your motto as far as being able to do the job accurately and correctly, but still make a mark for yourself and be somebody that people want to follow and want to read?
I think you have to have facts and supporting evidence. I'll give an example going even back to Twitter from today. The Astros promoted Mike Foltynewicz. For Astros fans, you probably know who that is. For non-Astros fans, you probably don't. But he's a 100-mile-per-hour, flame-throwing right-handed pitcher. He has a 5 ERA at AAA. He's always been a highly touted prospect, but he's got a 2-to-1 strikeout-to-walk ratio, right? So he's a guy who can strike you out just as easily as he can walk the ballpark. So on Twitter today, in the discussion and kind of the joy of, hey, we've got a new fresh face here, a new arm, I mentioned the fact that in June he had a 6.92 ERA, and in July he had a 7 ERA. That's a fact, right? I know that Mike Foltynewicz's girlfriend follows me on Twitter and might then say to him, hey, why is this Evan Drellich guy out to get you? I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know if she saw the tweet, but you can't live in that fear that, it's a fact. He was pretty terrible the last 2 months, and I have to point that out. It doesn't mean they shouldn't necessarily have promoted him. You know, there's certainly room for him on the roster, and he was probably going to have to be added to the team anyway this offseason. But as long as you have the facts and supporting evidence, I think, and you show up in the clubhouse and kind of make yourself accountable. You know, I've had guys question stories, and you know, I just say, look, all right, talk to me about it. What bothered you about that story? And then, you know, we kind of hash it out and move on.
Buck, we talked about your transitions back and forth from the field to the booth. Alyson, you worked for the team. You became a beat writer covering the team. You went back working for the team in a social media capacity,
Right.
back working for MLB.com. You've had to strike that balance on a couple of occasions.
Yeah, I just confuse people because I've never actually had to move from Houston with all these different jobs. So my philosophy has always been just to be accurate and be truthful, and you're not taking personal shots at people. I try to explain that when it comes to like a 15-game losing streak, and when it comes to a team, the only time that I find that it's really necessary to criticize the players and kind of put them in a bad light is if they're not, if they're making mental mistakes, if they don't care, if they're not trying hard. But people say, you know, what can they do? You know, why are they losing so much? I said, well, they need better baseball players. I mean, these guys are playing to their capacity. They're playing perfectly to their abilities. This is what they've put together. And I don't think that that's really a slam on anybody, but that's just kind of how it works. And there was a recent situation where, I mean, with Mark Appel, I found that him pitching in Lancaster was absurd because he didn't do well, and then they removed him from that and they put him back there. I spent time in Lancaster, which is a wind tunnel. So the flags in center field, they look like they've been starched. They don't fall, ever. And I'd heard that about it, because it's just desert. It's a gorgeous stadium. It's in the middle of the desert, and it's just windy. So, you know, the hitters, their batting averages are often very good, maybe a little bit better than they would normally be. But the pitchers also, I mean, some of them pitch very well. Ground ball pitchers are going to be fine anywhere, but there's a lot of pitchers that have these inflated ERAs. And I just felt that with Mark Appel being, you know, having had some issues, and there have been some health issues, and there might be some confidence issues, that would not be the place to put him. And I felt very comfortable saying that, having spent a lot of time talking to player development people from past regimes and their kind of methods about why they would put certain pitchers certain places. And there are pitchers who they didn't put in Lancaster in past years for a specific reason, because they don't want them to experience that, and they're trying to bring them to the big league. So it's things like that. I just think that, you know, if you're just honest and truthful and you're fair and you show all different sides and you talk to the people who are making those decisions, which I did, and talk to people who have experience in the past, which I did, and you can't just be, you know, rah-rah and Susie Sunshine all the time, as I call it, because then no one's going to want to listen to what you say and, you know, and hear your insight, because anybody can do that. So if you have some personal connections, you have some connections, you know, professional connections, then you use them and you try to deduce things from that.
Susie Sunshine.
That's what I told them when they wanted me to come on to do the social media. I said, if you're bringing me on to be Susie Sunshine and just mask over everything going on, I'm not your person. They're like, no, just be honest and fair and just keep doing what you're doing.
And Evan, what did Appel say? He called Lancaster the worst experience of his life?
Yeah, I actually saw his last start, and the Astros screwed up on Mark Appel in about 3 different ways this year. He was not ready at the start of spring training, at the start of the season, because he had an appendectomy before the year. So he shouldn't have even gone to any full season affiliate, and they never should have put him in Lancaster, where they sent him to twice. So not exactly management's finest moment this year.
Buck, did you have something?
Yeah, I do. And you reminded me of a story when I first started out my broadcasting career. It was actually my first month on the job. Tony Kubek was a great broadcaster for many years, and I was fortunate that he was in Toronto while I was playing. And there were 2 entities that were doing the broadcasting there. There was CBC and there was TV Labatt. And TV Labatt was going to separate, and all of a sudden, this new company came on called TSN. And TSN was going to develop their own broadcasting. I got released in 1986 as a player and offered the TV job in the same meeting. But Tony Kubek was there, and he was helping me. And one of my first reports back to Toronto from spring training, there were rumors that Ernie Witt was going to be traded to the Philadelphia Phillies for Lance Parrish, and that the Blue Jays had moved George Bell from left field, going to put Lloyd Mosby in center field and call up young Sil Campusano. And I was doing a live hit that night, and I said, well, that would be great. The Blue Jays would get an everyday catcher in Lance Parrish. Campusano becomes a premier center fielder. Lloyd Mosby's never been at the upper echelon of defensive center fielders, but he may become a terrific left fielder. I get to the ballpark next day. Bob Elliott comes up to me and he goes, so what do you think about the players not talking to you? But I evidently, with one little interview, I had upset everybody. And it was my first year away from playing. So I was very down in the dumps, but I went to Tony Kubek and he said, listen, you have the credibility to speak your mind. You didn't say anything about the character. You were voicing your opinion on a baseball topic. And as long as you do that, you're in fair territory.
Yeah, that's good advice. You know, and I want to have some fun with this next topic because we can tell little stories. We're on the front lines as broadcasters and writers, as you've kind of gotten an indication from our panelists. We're the first ones there in the clubhouse, or the last ones there at night, or on the team planes, on the team buses. And I'm curious from all of our panel members, maybe the best player they've ever had to cover, or maybe the most challenging. And I have a feeling there may be a story with their answers to each. And I'll open this up if anybody wants to jump in, the best or the most challenging. Brownie, you have to have at least a few.
Well, I would go back to Cincinnati days, and, you know, there were Hall of Famers with the Big Red Machine and Joe Morgan, Johnny Bench. It's hard to pick. You know, Bench being a catcher was just absolutely phenomenal. I think one of the greatest catchers of all time, and Morgan was one of the greatest second basemen of all time. So it would be hard for me to choose. The most challenging, you know, George Foster type guy who really didn't do many interviews. Those are the challenging guys, and then they want to make it tough for you when you're doing an interview with them on tape, you know. And so instead of a straightforward answer, like the running back Arian Foster with the Texans the other day. You guys don't care about that, but this guy it was completely idiotic. He just had one phrase he kept. What was that phrase?
He's the best, wants to be the best teammate he can be, Browning.
So every question he was asked, that was the answer. Come on. But yeah, the challenging guys are the ones who either don't do interviews or do them very seldom, and they're making it very tough on you.
Evan?
I won't name a name. There's an injured Astros player right now who has basically made a game of avoiding the media. And it's a problem for me as a reporter. It's a problem for the PR staff who has to try to corral him. And some guys are like that. You know, in 2010, I covered the Dodgers as an intern that year. That was a down year for Matt Kemp. He had come to the year with high expectations. He was also dating Rihanna at the time, as we kind of learned after the fact. But you know, he was very difficult. He was struggling, and he just wanted nothing to do with the media. And there's some guys like that, and then there are some guys who really get it and kind of really appreciate it and will always stand at their locker. And you find that in pretty much any clubhouse. But you know, everywhere I've been, there's been an example. Kelly Shopik was a backup catcher with the Red Sox who just could not have been more surly or unpleasant to deal with. And I hope he hears that. So.
Alyson, when you think about it, and I want to hear your answer, but I'm going to phrase this in the sense that you covered the Astros in the glory days when the leaders in the clubhouse were the best players and also maybe the best players to deal with, and what a wonderful aspect that is for any reporter.
Right. I mean, in Houston, it was a little different because Jeff Bagwell and Craig Biggio, they were available to the media every day, whether if they went 0 for 4 or they won the game or whatever, they were always available. And so players were, I mean, Bagwell more than Biggio, but players were afraid to really upset Bagwell. He was kind of like this, I mean, he was the kind of guy that fit in with everybody, and everybody just revered him as just not a great baseball player, but a great person. So they never really wanted to disappoint him, which sounds a little weird because they're all grown men, but that's sort of what the vibe was. So there really, over the years, there really weren't that many. And Lance Berkman was a fantastic quote because he refused to use cliches and he loved telling the truth. And it made the front office crazy sometimes, but he just told it like it was. And Billy Wagner was the other one that you couldn't wait to hear what he had to say, and then it got him run out of town. But there was an incident probably about 10 years ago. Adam Everett was a young player, and for whatever reason, after the game, the Astros had lost the game later, whatever happened, it was a loss, and that clubhouse was pretty much empty. Adam was at his locker, and so the cameras just went over to him. Everyone just kind of, just went up to him, and he was sort of like a deer in headlights, and he really didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to answer the questions that were coming to him as far as this bad loss. And back then, these losses were really bad because they were trying to win a World Series. And Bagwell walked in, and he saw what was happening. He pulled out of his side and said, "That will never happen again. You will never be in that situation again. I will always be here to take up for the team in that respect." So the only really odd guy was Jeff Kent. and the reason I say he was odd is because he had this persona that he loved to be difficult, and he loved for people to not really like him, but it was kind of all an act. And there were times that he was just really not nice to the radio people. He treated the beat writers great. But he would, someone would come up to him and he'd grab the credential and he'd look, "Who are you?" And that kind of thing. And he kind of made people a little crazy. He didn't really talk to his teammates. He made it very clear, we're not friends, we're teammates. He was the greatest competitor I've ever been around, and he was a wonderful teammate, and he's the guy you'd want on your team if you're trying to win. But he was also a really nice guy. Sometime toward the end of one of the seasons, I said to him, he was doing his normal thing, and I was trying to talk to him. I said, "If you don't watch it, I'm going to out you as a nice guy." And he laughed. Interestingly enough, it was, I had a decent relationship with him, as far as you can get with him. And the Astros lost Game 7 of the NLCS in St. Louis in '04. And we walked in, it was a really long time before the media was let in, and this was absolutely crushing. This was a worse loss than anything that the franchise had experienced. Well, '86 was bad too, but and it was silent, and you could tell the guys had been crying, and it was just one of those just awful things. And he signals over to me to come over to his locker room. I didn't know what he was going to say, and he said, "I just want you to know I appreciate all of your work, all of your professionalism. It was really nice working with you." And I went, I didn't know what to say. This was the saddest moment of all of their lives. I'm like, "Well, thank you, Jeff. It was nice working with you, too." So,
and a
I'll
couple
never
of years
forget
ago,
that.
now he comes back for the 50th anniversary season, and they're bringing back all the stars, starting with Rusty Staub and Jose Cruz, and we're going down the list, and Jeff Kent is on this list. Now, I've heard these horror stories about him not wanting to deal with broadcasters, and I'm going to follow up Buck's comments here in a minute with another story. So we're a little unsure about what he's going to bring to the table. Within 5 minutes of him being on the radio with us, if I was a TV executive, I would have hired him on the spot. This was after Survivor. He could not have been more engaging,
That's right, he was on
more
Survivor.
honest. He was fantastic. And here was a guy that made a career out of not wanting to talk to people. He may have been one of the best we had on the radio.
Absolutely. He was walking around. He was giving people his number. If you need anything, just let me know. It was just bizarre, but that's who he is in life. He has a great family. He's raising 4 great kids. He has a ranch. He's a really smart guy. He's very engaging. For whatever reason, he did not want you to know that when he was a ball player.
Buck, how about you? A couple of the players you've covered that have either been great or maybe a little bit of a challenge.
I've been reminded of so many different situations listening to the other 3 panelists, and Barry Bonds is one that jumps out at me. I had the fortune of working for ESPN and TBS, and I got to do a lot of national games. And Barry was hurt in San Francisco one of these times with bad back. I was sitting up on the back of the bench in the dugout in San Francisco, and he came out and he sat down next to me. Alyson, you both, all of you know this about Barry Bonds. If he wanted to talk, there's not a better storyteller or someone that can break down baseball any better than Barry Bonds. And that particular day, he wanted to talk. I grew up with Dusty Baker in Sacramento, and Dusty was his manager for a long time, and he knew that. So I think this particular day, he just felt like he wanted to talk, and we talked for 40 minutes about why they choke up on the bat. He said they used to send the bats, my dad would send us bats, they were too big for us to swing, so I always had to choke up to swing them. And that's where he learned how to choke up on the bat. We talked about his bats. He said, I don't hit too much because my back hurts. I don't want to hit too much in the cage. I can identify the ball out of the hand. And it went on for 40 minutes. Well, the next night on the air, I related some of these stories. He walks by me the next day and goes, I didn't expect you to talk about those stories. And walked right by me like he'd never knew me before. But to give you another great example of how people change, one of my best experiences in broadcasting, Dennis Eckersley gave up the home run to Robbie Alomar in the playoffs in extra innings. And it was a decisive home run, knocked the A's out of the game. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it because Eck had such a bad reputation as a player. and everybody hated him. And I can't tell you some of the things Cito Gaston used to call him, but they had a true hatred for one another. And after this home run, I went into the A's locker room. Dennis still had his jersey on. He talked to every reporter, TV announcer that wanted to ask him a question. He literally stood there till the clubhouse was empty, addressing it, courteous, straightforward, forthright, and said, "It hurts. I let my teammates down. I had the game in my hand, and I gave up a home run. It hurts." And he was wonderful. And he, too, has become a great broadcaster. Now, a guy that didn't like to talk to the media and was surly. But my favorite story of all, Jack Morris was with us in Toronto. They brought Morris over. They clinched the game in Milwaukee to clinch the division, 92. We set up a podium. I'm working with TSN during the doing the color with Jim Houston. I go in the clubhouse for the post-game celebration. Robbie Alomar, congratulations. Dave Stewart, it's a great time. Paul Molitor, Dave Winfield. Jack Morris jumps on the podium, grabs the mic from me. "Is this thing on? Is this thing on?" He's looking into the camera. He goes, "I don't know what this guy thinks, but he doesn't know anything about baseball. Anybody that listens to him is crazy." Walks off the stage. And I got an earpiece in my ear, and the truck goes, "What was that all about?" "I don't know." So now Pat Borders comes up and we pick it up. Well, for some reason, he was sitting in the clubhouse. Pat Henkin was pitching in the game. Henkin had one of the typical Pat Henkin games. 7 innings, 9 hits, just gutted it out, didn't have great stuff, walked off the mound. I said, "Boy, that was typical Pat Henkin right there. He didn't have great stuff, and he gives you 7 innings. And Morris was in the clubhouse sitting with Stottlemyre and Stewart and said, "What's he talking about? He's crazy." And they both went, "What?" Well, anyway, to make a long story short, Jack and I have become great friends. He broadcast with us last year in Toronto, but that was one of the most interesting moments of my broadcasting career.
When I got to the big leagues in 2006, one of the unique aspects of my job, and I guess I'm answering my own question here, but as a moderator, I can do whatever I want until they cut me off. Part of it was we were to do a post-game interview almost immediately following the game, and you give gifts away to the players and such. Our gift was $50 cash. And it had been this way for a number of years. I argued it should have gone up to like $52.50 and $54.10 as the years progressed. There were some guys like Andy Pettit who were insulted that you even bothered to give them this. "Get this away from me." The 10 seconds leading into the interview was, "I don't want it. Well, take it. I'm not taking it. Give it to the bat boy." "I don't want it. Please, it's yours." But the fun part to me was Chipper Jones, Prince Fielder, Albert Pujols. We'd interview them a couple of times over the course of 5 years, and they'd walk up to you and like, "I get paid for this today? I'm getting paid today." $50, yes. Johnny Manziel could roll that up and go into a bathroom. He wouldn't care, but Chipper Jones? Oh, sorry, Aggie fans. I like Johnny. There's been a lot of changes to the game, too. This year, instant replay is one. And I think it's with varying degrees of success that we're seeing this implemented. Who knows what's next? And, these panelists have had a wide-ranging baseball background and experience levels, and I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts on what we might see next in the game of baseball. Will it be something with pace of play, a pitch clock? Is there anything you could see 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that is going to continue to change the game the way it's evolved here recently?
I think it'll be pace of play. Commissioner, we had the civil rights game here in June, and the Astros played the Orioles, and the commissioner was on with us for half an inning or whatever. And after that finished, Alan Ashby was quizzing him about, because this is a big deal with Ash, pace of play. And I agree with him. It's, for those of you in this room, I would imagine you're not really pleased with it. But for the people who aren't in this room, who are 25 years old, they're not watching. And it's going to cost us a generation of fans if this game continues to drag the way it is right now. And I think it's all about, throw a pitch every 15 seconds. Don't let the batter get out of the box. Make the pitcher pitch. Too many mound trips, all these things. The Atlantic League just instituted, which you know, Brett, because you've been doing Skeeter's games, some new speed-up rules, and they're good. The only thing I didn't like, Buck, was that when the catcher gets on base, he automatically leaves for a pinch runner so he can get his gear on. I can't buy into that.
They are going to table that, though, Brownie. That's one that's not going to get implemented right away. But I think there's a lot to that. And Buck, what do you think about that as far as pace of play? Is that something that there's an urgency to address?
Yes, I think it's a very important problem, and Bill made a great point. We are losing a generation of fans. I was in Toronto at Real Sports a couple weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon. They had the football team on the big 90-foot TV, the football game, the soccer match. And it was as if it was a playoff game, a regular season game, TFC, Toronto Football Club, because there's a time frame. And this generation of people, they're all time-oriented. Everything is quick, 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 quick. Baseball, you watch one inning here, you don't watch a commercial, you go the next game, the next game, the next game. Games are taking too long. Instant replay, I would get rid of most of it. I would certainly get rid of the manager's ability to take the video from their clubhouse. That takes up so much time. Every fan that goes to a ballpark says, here comes the manager, he's going to look back in the dugout, thumbs up or thumbs down. It's a joke. If you're the manager and you think the play is wrong on the field, challenge it, and let's get it over with. I think the umpires, there have been 22 first-year umpires hired this year. There are 8 umpires in the review war room at one time. They rotate through New York. A lot of the younger umpires are interpreting their decisions in black and white. They're interpreting the lane at home plate, all of these things, and it's not right. The game has been played beautifully for a whole bunch of years. I would take it and use it on the boundary calls. We had a check swing in Boston. Munenori Kawasaki checked or fouled the ball off his foot. We couldn't tell one way or another, but that's not reviewable. That's not a reviewable play. Also, a ball in the dirt on strike 3 that's a short hop. Umpire hears 2 sounds, the ball hitting the ground, the catcher catching the ball, thinks it's a foul tip. You can't review that. Those are things that need to be adjusted. I think that they tried to implement too many things at one time, but I certainly would get rid of the manager's ability to review it in the clubhouse. I know it's going to cost a lot of guys a job. The guy that's sitting up there going, well, let me see, let me see, let me see. I think it takes too much time.
Evan, how about you?
Bobby Valentine in 2012 suggested they put lasers on home plate. So get rid of the umpire and have a perfect strike zone. I don't think I agree with that. I think I agree with Buck mostly that there's just something kind of hokey about the replay system as it stands now. The counter argument is they have gotten a lot of plays right. And it's kind of, for me personally, it's hard to argue against that. Yet at the same time, I mean, the song and dance of a manager running out there, 30 seconds just peeking back at his bench coach, thumbs up, thumbs down. There's probably a better way to do that. But I'm a little cynical about the pace of game because this has been a subject forever. I mean, the commissioner's been aware of it forever. He's put in rules that have not been enforced dealing with it. So I think it's still an issue and probably the issue that should be addressed, but I haven't seen any real evidence that it has been addressed yet, I don't think.
Allison?
Right.
Susie Sunshine?
Yeah, I do think that I'm just not sure how much time that really does add on. The manager checking with the dugout, it does add on, but how much time is saved well, actually the managers are kind of starting to run out there and losing their minds still, which I'm thrilled to see that they're actually still arguing. I remember
Mike Redmond could not be reached for comment.
Right, yeah, yesterday notwithstanding. But I think during spring training we were talking about it. It was a phrase called turning the manager. So it was an actual thing where the manager's going to walk out and he's going to look, and and it's not. I mean, we're kind of baseball purists, so it seems to be a little silly. I'm just not sure that that's what's dragging the game down. The other things there's also just bad teams. It just takes longer to get people out. So you're going to have a lot of 4-hour games in these places where they're not very good teams. But yeah, I find it to be a very hokey thing, and I don't think that anybody. You just have to, if you want to challenge it, you challenge it, and if you're not confident about it, then don't challenge it. And that's what makes it fun. I mean, I think that's the intent, is that you have to actually be strategic with your challenges, and there's really no strategy involved right now.
I think one thing that we all forget about, and it's the basis for why everybody's making so much money, is television. There's 2.5-minute breaks in between each inning, and that's 5 minutes an inning. That's 45 minutes a game. So if you're looking for 2-hour games anymore, it's not going to happen. That's the nature of the game. That's just the way it is.
I think I've asked enough questions. I've got a few from our fans in the audience, a few addressed to the broadcasters and such. I know, as a quick aside, that a lot of you are going to the Blue Jays Astros game this weekend, so have a great time with that. I know a few came out on a bus trip last night to the Skeeters game, and we were 2 outs away from a no-hitter last night. Clint Everett's a local product who was drafted by the Expos, and I was actually hoping he'd throw that no-hitter because this would be the audience that could tell me when was the last time one guy made 4 errors in a game and his pitcher threw a no-hitter that night. We came so close. 4 errors, but it didn't happen. Question is, which Twitter accounts are the very best to follow for breaking baseball news? Evan, do you have a couple in mind?
I mean, Ken Rosenthal and a couple of the other guys who, to me, it seems like MLB Network has really pushed Ken to the front, and Ken's own skill, too. I feel like even a couple years ago, Buster Olney and John Heyman might have broken more stories than they are now, and it's not a knock on them. They're both great reporters. My feeling these days, though, is that the majority, the major news goes through Ken Rosenthal. And it's not everything, but more often than not, I feel Ken's the guy.
Alyson?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's, John Heyman and Buster's less so, it seems like these days. Because I think Buster is, I mean, as much of, he is right on top of things, but he also does just a lot of like really deep analysis in his blogs. And so I think that he kind of digs more in things that are, if there's something happened or firing or controversy, and he kind of gets to the heart of everything. But John Heyman and Ken and who's that? Is there another one? Maybe there's not, but those are pretty much the ones.
Yeah.
Like those?
Jeff Passan and
Jeff
John
Passan,
Palmer. In sports other than baseball, too, we just see national writers, I think, and I don't know when it really began, but look at Woj in the NBA, look at Schefter in the NFL. It's a story that I'm kind of surprised nobody's written from a media writing perspective, just how dominant national writers have become in the sports scene. And I think it makes sense because they become kind of a pass-through for all information. You know, the GMs and agents, they want to go to someone who can put it out there quickly to the masses, get it on TV right away, and who they themselves can extract information from. So it kind of becomes a monopoly.
And that's the agents are the driving force behind all of this. I mean, the agents are calling these guys, so they're going to be the ones that are going to break the stories.
And it all goes back to ESPN, the magazine. John Walsh was the editor of that, and he started the promotion of Peter Gammons, and Peter Gammons was the first one that got on television. I worked with Peter Gammons in the broadcast booth. You think 3 men in a booth is tough? How about working with Chris Berman and Peter Gammons and trying to get a word in edgewise?
Just going to let that hang out there for a couple. I'm digesting that myself. This question's for Buck and Brownie, and I like this one. There's no name on it, but to whoever sent this question I give you some props. Do you think that the screens may be too crowded on television because of pitch trackers, scrollers, and other on-screen information?
I want to crawl in there and just pull that stuff off so we can see the game, you know. Just wipe it right out. No, we've got all kinds of wacky stuff going on. If you're into sabermetrics, you're not going to miss a whole lot because our producer is just wacko for numbers. Well, give me your favorite. I said, well, just give me a slash line. I hate batting average. It's a horrible stat. Just give me a slash line. So he puts that up. But he's got this little drop down from the bug, what they call the bug, up there at the top where they have the count, and the people on base. He has this little white thing that drops down like a letter coming out of a mailbox, and he'll put things like BABIP on there. And I said, well, I don't know how many of our fans really are into BABIP, but, just don't make me explain it, because when it's on the screen, I feel I have to explain it, and I can't, so please don't do that.
Yeah. Batting average, balls hit in play, and fielding, independent pitching, and all that. I have no idea about that, but you're right. There's information out there that we could literally, Bill and I, and I'm sure Evan and Alyson, we could work 24 hours a day and get new information. You could sit there. I can sit here before preparation, go back and see every game that Colin McHugh pitched, and I can go back and get every pitch, the velocity, where it was, the strike zone. You can work at this forever. And we have to temper our producers because they are, well, everybody's younger than I am. But they're products of the stats creation, and they want to put all that information out there. And my explanation to him is, if those people want that, they can get it on their laptop. They're watching it right with us. We don't need to give it for them. And if that's what they're looking for, they can get it as we're talking about the game.
It's amazing how it's trained us, though. You go back and watch ESPN Classic from a game from 15 years ago, and you flip it on, you're like, well, what's the score? What inning? How hard is he throwing? Who's batting? We've all been trained, right, to have the immediate information?
That's right.
This is a good question, too. With all of the mixed media covering baseball today, should the BBWA still dominate Hall of Fame selection? Of course, topical since we just came off the
No.
Hall of Fame class. Uh-oh, Susie jumped right in. Don't stop with that. Come on.
I have somewhat strong opinions on this. My main thing is that you should be a current baseball writer to be a Hall of Fame voter. So it's basically like the Supreme Court. Once you get a vote, you never lose it. And I think that maybe there should be some more stringent decision making there. I find that there are a lot, the writers are extremely qualified. Many of the writers are extremely qualified to be voting for the Hall of Fame. And then there are other writers who left baseball writing 30 years ago who are continuing to vote. I'm not so sure that that's the best way to do it. I think you need to actually be watching baseball in person. I think you need to cover 100 games a year. I think there just should be certain criteria, but there are also, there's a lot of people that also cover baseball a lot, and some of them are a lot better than some of the baseball writers that are not allowed to vote because they're not in the BBWA. So that's, I don't want to continue going on that diatribe, but there are a lot of extremely qualified people. I would rather Bob Costas be voting for the Hall of Fame than a golf writer who left baseball 25 years ago. That's what I say.
Evan?
I've only been a BBWA member for 2 years, so I haven't exactly set policy at this point. I do think there's a generational gap there, and I think there's a group of writers around my age and certainly above that too, who I think even the majority of BBWA people at this point realize the system should be changed. I don't think there's a simple solution. I am very, I was a blogger once. I have 3,000 posts on a message board somewhere. I've kind of come up through this digital age, so I kind of, I know the fan perspective and I know the blogging perspective. I would feel very uncomfortable with, despite how knowledgeable team-affiliated bloggers are, having them have a vote, because I do think there could be biases, but this is a very complicated issue. I don't have a solution. I've said this to many people. How exactly would you change it? I'm not sure. I do think we do need to change it. And I think it will change. I can't tell you when, but I think it will change. One thing to add, the Hall is actually very happy that the writers handle this because it deflects everything away from them. They don't have to deal with any of this, and the writers catch all the heat, which, and for 100 years. And that's really the problem, is that the system has been in place without much change for a very long time.
And I think those are probably the two cruxes of the argument. I think writers who are voting would say, people like Brownie, who's covered the game and broadcast the game for 30 years, maybe there's some bias, maybe he'd be inclined to vote for Bagwell because he knows him, versus Alyson's point, or the flip side is that some of the people that have votes are now working in insurance, working in sports talk radio, and people that are covering the game every single day aren't. And I think that's probably the debate back and forth that we may continue to have until we see some type of change.
I think it's really difficult to compare generations, and everybody, I'll give you one example. I think it's really, really a great example of how difficult it is to compare generations. For a long time, Vladimir Guerrero has been compared to Roberto Clemente. Roberto Clemente was 5'11", weighed about 175 pounds. Vladdy Guerrero was 6'4" and weighed 235. But they weren't even the same type of player, but I think it's difficult, unless you have seen many generations of players, to make analysis on Hall of Fame credentials. And I think there are a lot of people like Vin Scully, like the long-term broadcasters, that have seen everything. And when you think of Marty Brennaman in Cincinnati, I mean, who's a better guy to lean on for comparisons over the decades? And I think there are some people missing from the Hall of Fame vote that would have a great positive impact.
We've got time for maybe one more question, and as I was reading this question and heard the name Marty Brennaman, I kind of chuckled. And I'll tell you why in a second. It's addressed to the broadcasters. It says, what steps do you take in real time to edit yourself, or do you have a personal filtering technique? I love Marty. There's no filter. He just comes out like a car driving 90 miles an hour down the freeway. That's why we love him. But, Brownie, how about a filtering technique, or do you edit yourself in real time? Do you ever start down that road and you're thinking, oh, goodness, even with a 0 rating, I got to back this train off?
I speak very slowly. No, a lot of times I'll catch myself in mid-sentence and I'm thinking, I don't know if this is really too wise, so let's just divert into a different direction here. No, I've blurred things out and I've been, had to apologize and I've been inaccurate and all the mistakes that I think I've probably made all the mistakes that can be made, but then again, tonight I may discover a new one. I don't know.
I think that's really interesting with the Twitter world out there. And my wife looks at these things, and I don't want to be bothered. But she'll say, oh, last night you said this guy, and that was really that guy, and you said he's got 3 hits, and he actually had 4 hits. And, there wasn't a time when I used to worry about that.
Yeah.
But you know what? We say about 10,000 words a night, and you're going to make some mistakes. And when I have Ghosts and Goins in back-to-back, every once in a while, Ghosts is going to become Goins, and it's just going to happen. And you know what? We let the pictures say the words, and like Bill says, there's a long drive to left field, and you got to look down and say, okay, who hit that, and where's the other guy going? Exactly. And you just let the pictures carry it until you can sort things out.
And as a broadcaster, as a writer, I'm sure we all have days we're feeling good, thoughts are coming to us, we're writing, we're broadcasting. There are other days when it's just not there. And as we talked about criticism earlier, there was a game every once in a while you'd have it and you'd sit back and you're like, you know what? This is why I don't criticize players too much, because I just don't feel it today. They're entitled to the same thing because they're actually playing and running around. I don't know if you've had a few of those too, Brownie, but it's you just after a long road trip, long night, you just don't have it.
First batter comes up, and I cannot even pronounce his name. I can't even get you through one sentence, and I'm thinking, I've got 3 hours of this?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was a fantastic turnout today. Thank you for your great questions and your attentiveness today. I'd like to thank Evan Drellich of the Houston Chronicle. Keep up the good work. One of the true gentlemen in this game, my friend Bill Brown. If you live in Houston, please ask to be a Nielsen family. Just flip it on Channel 39. It would make him feel a lot better. Susie Sunshine, one of my favorites as well, Alyson Footer, national correspondent. And Buck Martinez, what a great job Buck did with his insight today from a playing, managing, and broadcasting standpoint. Thank you for tuning in.